Hi, I'm Captain Alec Robbie. I've been a sport fishing guide and captain for over 15 years. I've taken people fishing from the waters of Point Conception, California, to Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, and everywhere in between. During that time, it has taught me the importance of preserving the wild places we enjoy for years to come. Join me as we discuss techniques, conservation, and engaging our community to keep our world wild and to keep our outdoor pastime strong for generations. This is Keep It Wild with Alec Robbie. Well, hello everyone. Today we are joined by Chef Craig Walker. Craig is not only an incredible chef and restaurant owner, he is also an avid angler and outdoorsman. So I am looking forward to hearing his perspective from both a sport fisherman side and as a culinary expert, as a chef and restaurant owner. It'll be nice to kind of bridge the gap between those two realms. But without any further ado, welcome, Chef Craig. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Morning, Alec. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I definitely have a passion for not only fishing but cooking and kind of bridging the gap in between. I grew up in South Louisiana. Fishing, hunting, gardening was always part of my upbringing, and so when I became a chef, there was actually a great story on when I knew it was the right fit for me. I was in culinary school, and we were actually it was fish day, and the chef was after he did his demo, asked the class if we had any participants that wanted to try to fillet a fish. And at that point, I was a bit hesitant. I didn't really, I was new to the whole culinary world. Obviously, I did stuff at home, but I didn't have any professional training. And so after the reluctancy of everyone in class not wanting to try it, I raised my hand and said, "Chef, I got this." And so I went up there and effortlessly cleaned a fish. And at the end of class, the culinary instructor, the chef, said, "Chef, I need you to stay back." And initially I thought I was in trouble, but that was the moment when he sat me down. He said, "Craig, this is an immense talent that you have that you don't even know." And for me, growing up, it was just a chore, and my dad and I would go fishing. I would clean the boat, clean the fish. And my father actually was the one that taught me how to clean fish and the intricacies of how to do it, and or at least how I thought I should do it. And obviously through the years, those skills have honed in and have gotten better. But even in culinary school, it was acceptable to the chef to the point where he said, "Don't ever do that again in front of me, chef." So it was a great moment in my career, and I believe it was the first moment that I felt like the culinary path was the right move for me, because it was something that I could do with a comfort level and execute at a high level. So that's kind of my background of being from the South, fishing a lot, offshore fishing. Um, growing up on the water, fishing, the Gulf of Mexico, now the Gulf of America, and that was my backyard. Every weekend, every chance I could get was trying to fish. So it's once I moved to California a couple years ago, it was a whole new world. It was a whole new fishery, a whole new way of thinking, and it's the great thing about fishing is no matter where you do it in the world, the mechanics and the techniques are very similar, but there's obviously intricacies and certain things that can make you better or worse at the mission.
Yeah, absolutely. And the focusing in on, that's a great background from, your past. And now, fast forward to now, it's my understanding, like one of your you do. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there's like two avenues of Craig Walker right now. There's Le Coupe, which is a seemingly, I haven't tried it yet, but from the couple pictures I've seen, I need to go try the Le Coupe's fried chicken.
Yeah.
The southern. What would you just call it? Like a southern themed. I don't want to just call it a fried chicken place. So,
Yeah,
but
no, so the coop was kind of I'll backtrack and kind of give you a brief history of everything. I went to Le Cordon Bleu Culinary School in Austin, Texas, French, culinary school. From there, I was down in South Florida in West Palm Beach, working under a fine dining establishment. From there, was in Atlanta, Georgia, working with a wine bar concept to develop. From there, came back to New Orleans, and opened up my first restaurant called Something Else Cafe, then my second Charcoal's Gourmet Burger Bar. After around 9.5, 10 years of operating in New Orleans, I decided to sell out, move out west. I had a friend that lived out here, started doing private chef work, really excelled in that. Got a phone call from another buddy at one point to take a lead executive chef position in Aspen, Colorado. That's where we developed a restaurant called 7908. And we called that an elevated supper club. And so we had dishes that everyone was familiar with, but then we just elevated them with, higher quality ingredients, techniques, and execution. That's where the fried chicken came in. So we created the bone-in fried chicken, which is a chicken thigh that we French the bone. So the bone is connected, but it is exposed. So the person doesn't have to navigate around the bone to eat the flesh. And so um, after we marinate it in a buttermilk hot sauce, dredge it in a seasoned flour, then we fry it. And after we fry it, we toss it in a chili honey. The word chili usually is misperceived because it's more of a flavoring agent than a heat element. A lot of trends right now in the restaurant chicken world are Nashville hot, which has been an educational um, curve for us to teach the general public that we aren't hot chicken. We're a southern type of chicken, in theory, and then we toss it in a chili honey, and that's what kind of sets us apart from the other chickens out there. And then also, our motto is all thighs, no fries. So we focus on chicken thighs. We don't have enough capacity to do French fries, which, regardless of what you think, when people come to our restaurant, the menu's exposed and everything else, and people still say, okay, I want tenders and fries. And fries are just kind of like the default side item of fried chicken. We don't sell them because I don't think that I could produce them to travel well, whereas the chicken does travel well, and we do a lot of delivery and catering. So that was one thing that was really important to me, was the integrity of the product an hour after being cooked versus 5 minutes out the fryer. Um, so the the Le Coupe was actually, after Aspen. Um, my wife and I moved to Newport Beach, and she was doing wedding planning, and I was doing private chef work, and then COVID hit, and so we started basically running a kitchen out of the house. Um, and it was just this very grassroots effort that kind of blew up. The fried chicken was always the most popular item of the week. It was obviously a proven concept in Aspen, so we decided to develop a whole kind of brand concept around it. That's when the chicken sandwich came alive. That's when the corn ribs were invented, and a list of other things. We don't have a lot of menu items. We just have a lot of a few great items that we do really, really well. One of my pet peeves of going into a restaurant is having too many choices. I believe that the restaurants that I find the most pleasure with are the ones that are just like really straightforward. This is what we do well. This is how we're going to do it, and let me show that to you. So the Coop was born. in a cloud kitchen, which is essentially a facility that has individual small kitchens in it. We realized that there was an emotional detachment that we couldn't connect with our customers because it was just to go. So then we ended up finding a brick and mortar on 709 Northwestern Avenue in East Hollywood, and it's been great. It's taken off. We've had a couple amazing breaks with uh, Instagram and social media influencers that have really taken it upon themselves to elaborate and showcase the food that we're presenting, which has been great. A lot of restaurants have to spend tons and tons and tons of money marketing their product to try to get people in the door. Whereas we've been very lucky that other people have taken on that burden and responsibility for us. So yeah, so fried chicken is something that I'd say I'm pretty good at. It is a passion of mine, but behind closed doors, the my biggest passion is working with seafood, fish in particular. That's where I feel the most comfort with. As for a business plan, I think that chicken has the most longevity, just because of the fluctuations in the market, the availability, the consistency of product, and everything else that falls into line. But fishing and bringing that particular product to the table, I would say is my biggest passion when it comes to the culinary world.
Right on. Well, man, that was all amazing. That's amazing to hear the backstory there. And I was kind of wondering, like, oh, should we even hit on it because it's a big part? But I'm glad you did. That's an amazing illustration,
Sure.
and it really hits on a lot of themes I see in what you bring to, dare I say, society nowadays. But like, I mean, you're so your mind and what you do is so culinarily technical in my mind, yet you make it simple, personable, and just like, you know what I mean? It's like it's a lot of technicality, but it's not technical at the end.
Sure.
At the end of the day, it's just something very, very enjoyable to a large demographic and brings a lot of joy. And like kind of pivoting to the seafood, like you're talking about, or you mentioned, that was like obviously the main interest I kind of had to begin all this. So you started the restaurant, but you mentioned before you were a personal chef, or is that what you said? Like a
Yeah.
personal, yeah.
Personal,
Um,
personal private chef. I had a multitude of clients that would I would do short stays of a couple months and being their only person that would work for the family. And a lot of these people are traveling around the world. So when they
right,
were at their house in Southern California, I would take that position.
cool. So like in that realm, like I don't know, I guess let's just break it down pretty even from a professional seafood standpoint, but be it like the buyer or like procuring it. Like what do you look for in seafood? Like I mean, we could pick a couple different examples of fish, but obviously a pretty popular one is everyone loves like bluefin tuna or ahi, yellowfin ahi. Like when they want
Sure.
something like that, like, what do you look for when you're procuring that? And then maybe like a white lighter fish, like a like a white sea bass or another local kind of thing. Like what do you look for professionally as a chef? And then later on will be the other side when
Sure.
you are catching it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, so first, the relationship with the purveyor, I think, is the most important part. Establishing that level of communication and that understanding of what your qualifications are as a seller and the expectations of a buyer. And so I went through countless accounts trying to search for the best. I mean, starting the restaurant in Aspen and then working into that upper echelon of the private world, these people demanded the best. They weren't afraid to pay for it. So my job was to seek out and really try to find the difference maker in that in those dishes. And my favorite chef from culinary school, her my favorite quote from school was, "You can't make chicken salad out of chicken shit," and that philosophy has really played a huge role in everything that I do, in the sense that if you don't start with a great product, it's almost impossible to finish with a higher level product. So one of the things for when we're actually looking for seafood is the region where it's caught. Obviously, yellowfin tuna that's caught out of Hawaii is going to be a different profile than yellowfin tuna that's caught out of the Gulf of Mexico, and so forth. And depending on the year, depending on the time, their diets are changing, their patterns are changing. So understanding, the different, it's kind of the seasonality of gardening. When it's citrus season, you'll see a lot of menus with those elements. When it comes into like summer, you'll see things with cucumbers and tomatoes, and in the fall, you'll see more root vegetables and things like that. And it's the same kind of way with fish as well. Is they're on a cycle too. They're pretty much moving around, and right now, being in the middle of February, fishing is kind of stopped, and everyone's kind of getting ready for that springtime bite and ready to get out there. And
Mhm.
so understanding where the fish is coming from is also really important. So having that communication with the purveyor and the people that are selling it to you, and understanding the identification marks of the fish, with the eyes not being glossy, the gills not, the gills being super red. Any kind of discoloration on those aspects can represent a mishandling of the fish, which and we'll touch on this conversation about the fishermen and the integrity of how they actually prepare for, let's say, kill, prepare, and store the fish, has a lot to do with how that dish ends up on the plate. And I
Mhm.
think with seafood, in particular fish, it's the absolute most important part, because the second that fish is really caught can determine the stress and the amount of time that it takes to get properly stored, can also preserve that fish into a longer shelf life for you to utilize all the parts of it.
Right. There's a quick question before. So, like, my understanding here is, I mean, and to kind of like give a little umbrella kind of just question or statement in regards to seafood, any fish, it seems that all fish are, in the grand scheme of proteins, be it, chicken and beef and whatever, and obviously seafood or fish are like the most delicate. It's like the most delicate, easily mishandled protein there is, which I almost think is like, how if you get some people are like, oh, I don't like fish, it's too fishy. I mean,
Sure,
that's just, to me, it's not the fish's fault. And it took
sure,
me a while to realize that that's just, if you handle fish like you handle beef from dispatch to plate, there's a little, it amplifies in the process until you're like, wow, this is weird. You know what I mean? But you know, beginning and finishing that whole it's just the chain of what would you call it? The chain of handling, the handling chain is
sure.
like so much more involved with seafood and fish. So like, that's just something. So would you agree that is fish is just by and large one of the more delicate proteins there are in
Yeah,
the
and I would say
in
it's
the
by
world?
far the most mishandled protein. I mean, for me, and going to any grocery store in Southern California just makes me cringe when you
Yeah.
see some of the salmon. Or like yesterday, I went to Whole Foods, and the tuna was like a purple brownish color, and in my mind, I'm asking myself, how can they even sell something that is so far gone that even the best chef with the best credentials could not put a skirt around this and make it look good? I mean,
Right.
it just,
Yeah.
there's And I do believe that that is going to be the next like big sector of food delivery when it comes to seafood, because first of all, it's mishandled, but second of all, the chain of hands that it has to go through in order to get to that display case. By that time, the fish is already, past its point of perfection.
Hmm.
Very few fish hold their integrity to freezing, and so by the time some of this fish is frozen and then defrosted and then possibly even refrozen again, um, the water molecules in the protein freeze and frost and become very fragile and mushy. And again, like you said, when someone says that they don't like something because it's fishy, that's a bad that was a bad chance that they took on eating fish. And
Yeah.
from South Louisiana, it's the same thing with like shrimp. When shrimp smell bad, they're old. I mean,
Yeah.
they're bait. They went from food to bait, and unfortunately, a lot of people haven't had the luxury of being exposed to higher quality products, which therefore would change their opinion on the plate. Um,
Yeah.
I know that for it's part of one of the funnest things to do as a chef is when someone says, "Oh, I don't like this." My first rebuttal is, "Are you allergic?" Because now that you told me you don't like tuna, the first thing I'm going to make for you is tuna,
Yeah.
um, just based on the idea that you know as a kid, I was a really, really picky eater, and culinary school was like the first time where, it's like going to the doctor, right? You go to the doctor and you put all this trust in a doctor because they have the experience and they have the background to tell you on how to feel better. Well, a chef is kind of that same person when it comes to food, because you're relying on a chef to create something that you think is wonderful or enjoyable, right? And so when someone says that they don't like something, it's usually something that brings back emotions of dissatisfaction, and then allows them to build a wall around that and never want to try it again.
Hmm.
And so I think that, especially when it comes to seafood, fish, and kind of all the players around it, one bad fish meal will ruin your life forever. One great fish meal will also change your life for the
Yeah.
better forever. So um, it's one of those educational aspects of um, the exposure to higher quality products.
Yeah. And that's kind of, I've had, I just love to fish. And believe me, I kind of was in that same sector a little bit back in the day of like, man, I don't like insert X, Y, Z, like these kinds of fish, but I
Hmm.
catch them and I'm like, oh, I only like yellowtail, but I don't like calico bass and sand, what whitefish and stuff like that.
Sure.
But just, at least for me, my love wanted me to like, why? Like what? And then it's pretty recent in my life, discovered a couple ways to just make them good. And it was that epiphany of realizing it's all handling. Like the way we handled them before, we're literally like setting these things up to fail. Like we're setting these fish up to fail. We're opening that shrimp bag and it smells like, bleh. But
Yeah.
that's my fault. So like, um, it'd be, yeah. If there's one takeaway from all this, it'd be I would like people to backing up, seafood seems to, the way it needs to be handled is obviously on the upper echelon of like, could be the upper echelon of class, like not class, but just a higher end of prices at a restaurant. There's a reason why a seafood place is going to be more expensive because it's just more expensive to handle.
Sure.
But I think it'd be nice for everyone to be able to take away that everyone can enjoy good seafood or fish, rivers, whatever, if they just take a couple steps catch it themselves, take a couple extra steps, and they will have a piece of fish at home that they could put their nose right on top of, and they'll be like, smells like meat. Like this
Yeah.
to me, that's fish. It's fresh, but like obviously fishy is like it's a fishy is basically rotting. I guess it's
Yeah.
like it sucks that that's tied to seafood, but it's basically the beginning of a breakdown. Well, you could probably correct me on it,
Yeah.
but some sort of process there. So,
The protein
um,
starting to decompose for sure. And I think
yeah,
the biggest one of the biggest enlightening trips in my life was this past year. My dad and I traveled to Japan, and we went to the world's largest fish market. And the most interesting thing that I took away from it, first of all, obviously the quality of seafood there is bar none. I mean the integrity that they carry across the board is something like I've never seen. But you had these open markets, and you would never see a single fly, and
that's
that was
crazy.
just the most remarkable thing. I mean, it's hundreds of thousands of pounds of seafood and no flies, um, and that was just something that was so eye opening to me, was that it's all about handling. And we'll touch on to some of the methods that have been hundreds and hundreds of years with ikajime and things of that nature, um, which has really changed kind of the course of that element. And I believe that fishermen in Southern California, fishermen all across the world are really kind of seeing that and understanding that that those little things that you do right after the catch can mean a lot more um, after the catch and for the preservation of the fish.
Yeah, that's a yeah. That's you went to the mecca of seafood handling, as I've only read and heard about, and it's one thing we can take away from. I don't want to classify Japanese people as a whole, but their meticulousness and level of respect for what they consume is like second to none. Like just
Sure,
how it's just it's just not how we do it here. And going back to your like, oh, you trust a dentist to work on your teeth, just like you trust a chef to work on your food. Like, what amount of trust did we have to like overcome to like, oh, I'll eat raw fish? Like, you know what I
sure,
mean? How big of a culture jump was that originally? Right now, it's like everyone loves it. Oh, it's got the sushi. The amount of trust you're trusting that dude in his procurement of that seafood and the quality, like one wrong move and it's like bad. But
sure,
there's just such a art to it, and it's amazing. So that's cool. Yeah. So why don't we pivot to sport fishing? So
sure.
yeah, you well, I guess what's your main style? What do you like to do? Southern California, like charter boats, private boats, big boats. Like what's your
Yeah,
style
well,
now? What do you
I
see?
mean, so I love I love blue water fishing. So I love pelagic fishing. All the other types of fishing is fun, but you know, tuna, yellowtail, even swordfish out here is a lot of fun. Um, that's kind of my wheelhouse. I kind of got involved or introduced to the West Coast fishing. Is I had a buddy that hooked me up with another buddy that liked to fish. He invited me onto one of the cattle boats down in San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Loved it. Thought it was amazing. It was just a really cool experience to have that so close to home. I didn't know that the fishery here was so strong. From what people have told me, I got lucky. These tuna weren't all around 10 years ago. So,
Did you move here kind of 2015 and beyond, or after
yeah.
that?
And
That's
so
classic.
I kind of got lucky with that. And, as I did fishing and went on some of these boats and some of these experiences, I obviously made more friends and more connections through the food world, through the culinary world, and from then, establish relationships to go on private sport boats, which obviously for me is kind of the ultimate challenge. I think with the cattle boats, you should say, it's more about luck because there's 30 people dropping rods at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
whereas and tons of bait being tossed at these fish to corral them. Whereas a sport boat, you have to look for more indications and be a little bit more savvy on the binoculars and trying to find indications of finding fish, and then once you locate the fish, positioning yourself with the boat, the current, the wind, and the gear that you have to put yourself in the best position to score a big bite. And then once it all comes down to the gear and the people that you're with and the coordination of those people and how well they communicate, because when it gets to crunch time, everyone needs to kind of understand their role to get to the goal. It's kind of like it's like a band. If someone's not hitting the drum at the right time and stroking the guitar at the same time, it just doesn't all fall into place. And sometimes you get lucky and do all the wrong things and still end up with a great catch. But for
Yeah.
the most part, I like to say that if you go into it prepared, you have a better chance of being successful. And in the culinary world, we call it mise en place. It means everything in place and everything has a place. And so I try to take that kind of philosophy into fishing and making sure that that every little aspect, whether it's the knot to the lure or the braid, and making sure that everything's properly fixed, so that if we are given the opportunity, then we can kind of seize the moment. And so, yeah, I'd say sport fishing in Southern California is an incredible experience for people that haven't tried it. For people that want to do it, I think that the cattle boat, I have a lot of opposition to that, just because of how many fish are not how many fish are taken, because I do think that the limits here are not too extravagant, considering, like, from South Louisiana, some of the limits out there are a little bit outrageous. They kind of have too much allowance on fish. I do think that when it comes to bluefin, um, when you get a big bluefin, chances are you're not going to know what to do with all that meat. So,
Mhm.
some of these boats that are going out for a week at a time and pulling in, 3 fish per day or whatever it might be, and then putting it in this ice water sludge, I just don't think is really the right way to do it. But that's, for someone else to say. So it's nice to go on a sport fishing boat. I've become great friends with people like Ryan Griffin, aka Pack Fighter, on Instagram.
Nice.
Him and I
That's
do a lot
cool.
of fishing together, and he's exposed and shown me a lot to the fishing world out here. All to the point where he even has like a Tempur-Pedic like mattress set up, so when the fish comes on board, it's not slapping and beating itself up, because, like we touched on before, the second that fish is landed, there's a couple movements and things that need to be executed immediately, to really change the difference of the quality of meat, especially with something like a yellowtail. If a yellowtail is caught and is immediately brain spiked, and their gills are clipped and ecogemed with a rod, that quality meat versus something that's just thrown on top of ice is completely different.
Right,
Um,
right. And
and
that actually, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, and so some of those cattle boats, they'll do like brain spikes and stuff like that, but then they'll just throw it in this like bloody slush water. And if you have any, I call them bullet holes, but if you have any gaff marks or gaff holes that allow that water to go in, it kind of spoils the whole fish. And then you kind of ask yourself, well, what am I doing this for? You know, is this just an onslaught, or am I really like going to do something with this fish? And that's where like the culinary mind comes in for me, is that anything that I fish or hunt, I have to have, I already know what that's going to look like in the end game before it gets on the boat. So I already have my mind on what I'm going to do with it. You know, if I'm going to, you know, smoke some of the tuna or can some of the tuna, and then obviously pull off the loins and the belly and some of the higher pieces and cuts for sushi and things like that. So I do think that people are becoming more educated about it. I wish that more people would understand that, you know, throwing a bunch of tuna in your freezer is just not the option. Get
Right.
more friends, get more friends, give them
It's a
more free, you know, fresh fish that they can, you know, enjoy. And then there's also discussion about, you know, the dry aging fish, which I do believe some fish really work well with that, but it's also based on each individual fish, how they're taken, and if they are subject to that technique of preservation, which has
mhm.
been around for, you know, thousands of years. It's just more or less coming into um, you know, light these last couple years.
Right. Yeah. And before, so I like the road we're going on there, but before we do, I want to kind of a couple things. So
Sure,
like you're saying, cattle boat, great way to do exactly what it did to you. Nice little exposure, little trial. You know what I mean? It's just
sure.
the most one of the most economic ways to, allow someone to, I mean, going on a cattle boat versus like owning a boat that's hundreds of thousands. You know what I mean? It's just a nice way to intro it. So there's always a spot for them for sure. And obviously, like economically care for the fish. There's only so much that they could do, but as an angler going into that, there is some things you can kind of, like you said, you can kind of mentally prepare what your plan is for your catch. Like, okay, you know, I like this. Might be a little sushi party with my friends, might be time for some canning and whatever like that, and just be aware of that. Could definitely you know be helpful, if for that style where it's like, like I think you said onslaught, but I mean, I've been in that situation. I'm guilty of it. I can't. There's a
Sure.
little bloodlust going on. There's a primal thing that gets tapped into each and every one of us, and when that's happening, and it's like it's hard to fight, and it's pretty crazy. I've seen just I've seen everyone change during that time, except my. It's weird. One time I took my mom. She came out fishing with me on the Polaris Supreme just to see what I did, and we
Hmm.
got into one of those. She's the only person that caught one. Is like, I'm good, and then went up and just like she recorded me like on her phone and recorded what was going on. She's like, I can't describe this to my friends. It's just crazy. These men,
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, that's the one person that signed up and was in it and didn't like it was just biting bluefin. Just they were just
Yeah.
biting, and she just like caught her first one. She's like, I'm good. That was hard, and like recorded, and like I'm like, oh wow, it's good self discipline. But either way, going into that, before that mayhem, before that bloodlust, and like having a plan, of what you can do, and it's not the end of the world to like release a fish either. So like
Sure.
if you have a plan for not disposing but utilizing what you decide to take, I think that's the most we can ask for everyone, really. You know what I mean? And then further down the line, it just gets more and more like intricate with care. But they're economically, that's catch fish, gaff them, put them in an RSW hold. Like it'll get it home, it'll get it good. Um, but yeah, stepping past that, it definitely there's a couple things that can be done to like really, really, hit on the to emphasize the utmost care, and that's kind of what you're. It sounds like you're about to dive into is like the utmost care. But
Sure.
I nowadays, if I take people out or if I go fishing on like a smaller I'm just a smaller party of like taking out a smaller group of people. Like it could be a big boat, little boat, whatever, yacht, 6-pack, whatever. Um, like I kind of have that mindset, like prepare before. I don't want to count chickens before they hatch, but I'm like, hey guys, option A, option B, option C. Option A, we catch big. If we're catching big, if there's big potential for big bluefin or big bluefin, I'm like, realistically, like, what are we looking at here? Like, do you guys want to take home like 4 200 pounders? Like, that's kind of nuts, and we always
Hmm.
kind of regret it. Do we
Yeah.
not? And like, oh yeah, yeah. And most of the time when I hit the dock, if I've taken people there, we hit the dock and they're like, oh, dude, all I need is a chunk like this, and I'm good. Just a little party for my neighbors, and I'm like, okay, like, so we're gonna cut up. So everyone's got that. So one fish got everyone their block for their like pokey party or whatever, and then you got all this others that it's like gonna they never use, or some people utilize them, but that's the thing is some people when I've done this, some people are like, oh, I have a good me and my wife and my neighbors, we got a good canning thing, so like let it rip. Like if we
Yeah.
get this 100 pounds of meat for me, if it works out like that, we can handle it and utilize them. Like cool, check. And then kind of have a little rough framework, and then we go out and the fishing's what it is, and a lot of times we catch like 180 200 pounder, and that's like everyone's like beautiful for sushi, like this will do, and they're like, oh, it's maybe another for the canning guy or a guy who wants to can or smoke some or whatever, cool. And then catch a third one, it's like, all right, like if we can find a way to like get the hook out or whatever, like we don't have to drive in, guys. We can let
Keep
this
fishing. Yeah.
200, it's actually kind of, it's really kind of cool to like, it's like the ultimate capture, really. When you catch a fish, you can just sit on the swim step and either just cut the line right at its corner of its mouth, or if the hook's kind of right there, you can kind of eat. And a lot of times bluefin, they get a hole so big that you just like give it a little slack and it just fall, like the big hook will just fall right out, and then whoop,
Sure.
swims away. It's like you had it, you were able to control that fish so well, you're able to release it. So it's but anyhow, to your point, the plan is huge, and respecting that resource is is all we can really ask for. Because right now we're living in the heyday, like since 2015, kind of when they established this residency in Southern California that has been so good, and people are kind of taking it for granted. It's like, well, let's keep this good. I mean, who knows what forces of nature at work, but I don't know. Let's try to keep it good so my daughter can catch one like 50 miles off Los Angeles. Like,
Yeah.
I used to have to go 200 miles into Mexico to catch a 40 pounder. You know what I mean? In like
Yeah.
my day. Now it's right there, like, or closer. Some days it's like, oh my God, they're 3 miles from the mouth of the harbor. Like, it's amazing. I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole, but so,
Yeah.
yeah, fish care now. Boom, you're out. Get some friends, get a neighbor, utilize it fresh. How do we like what's the ideal way to, well, actually, I guess we should define ikejime because it is very important, but I want to make sure people kind of understand the rudimentary concept of this. It's basically what Craig's talking about, and I might be missing some here. You subdue the fish, you catch it, subdue it with a spike of sorts in its brain, kind of gruesome, but humanely, bam, lights
Hmm.
out. It's dispatched. When that happens, the fish is not all the way dead, believe it or not. There's a lot of stuff going on in the nervous system, like the spinal cord throughout, and a lot of micro twitching and a lot of other stuff going on. And Craig also, Craig was mentioning you run a wire through that hole or a different hole, but basically you go down that spinal cord. This all sounds gruesome, but honestly, it's like the most respectful thing to
Yeah.
do with this fish. I don't want to say liquefy, but you basically, I forgot the word, but you run the wire down and it eliminates that nerve of doing the rest of the stuff. So the meat is just now meat. It is relaxed. It is beginning to, it just stops a myriad of different things from happening. And that is huge. And one of the, I've actually, going back to like the original thing that I was saying back in the day, some fish were kind of stinky and weird in my book. I started doing that to like smaller fish, like whitefish and sheep's head and whatever, and the meat went from like nice and white and I could see some blood vessels to just beautiful white. Like I was like amazed at the difference it makes on every fish.
Sure.
Just so anyway, that's EKG. Maybe I left out. Okay, you gotta okay.
No, no. So, I mean, for me, I guess to dive in a little bit further. So with anything, um, and it's calling it fight or flight, right? And so when
Right.
that fish hits the deck and it's saying, "Oh my God, I'm out of water and I need to figure out," it starts just like with humans, it starts to panic, right? And when those
Mm-hmm.
panic signals um, create lactic acid that gets built up in the muscles, creates essentially heat, and starts to cook the meat from within. And so, send that, whenever you send that rod or wire above the spinal column, it 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 sends the fish into paralysis where it isn't allowed to send those signals to the meat. And so what that does is it actually relaxes the fish and stops that fight or flight process. And so once you do that, the fish is not only humanely killed, which obviously, like you've tapped on, it's more of a gruesome process than just throwing it on ice. But when you just throw it on ice, that fish is struggling just even more. And a lot of times when people just throw it on ice, just one side of that fish is on ice
Mm-hmm.
instead of the other side that's exposed to just ambient air temperature. And so, to deep down further, it's kind of important to have like a slush, an ice slush, which you can add salt to it because these fish are coming out of salt water, and so to try to mimic that same um, element, you can use seawater with ice and allow that fish to come down to temperature as fast as possible. I don't know the exact equation, but every degree above 32 is exponentially decays flesh. So just like the magnitude of an earthquake is exponentially greater um, per each number, it's kind of the same equation for the preservation of fish and how fast that bacteria starts to grow and break down and decompose the fish. And so to try to get it close to that 32-degree mark without freezing it is kind of the ideal situation.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like you said, whitefish, other smaller fish, that has a much smaller composition, so it's you can achieve that much faster than, let's say, a 200-pound bluefin.
Right.
A 200-pound bluefin is going to have more energy, is going to have more blood, and so doing these things initially can make an immense difference. And like you were saying, the difference between each one is if you just take let's say a regular tuna that hasn't been properly handled versus one that has, when you go to cut in it, the capillaries, like the little veins on an ecogene fish, you won't see any of that. Whereas on a fish that hasn't been properly stored, sometimes the flesh will actually be like pulling itself apart from the sinew, and there's it's almost like a river of capillaries, and that just goes to show you that fish was super stressed. It was sending signals on fight, 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 and basically pushing all that blood back into the meat, where we're actually trying to pull all that blood out of the meat. And
Right.
blood's the one of the kind of leading factors of spoilage. So the faster you can get that out, the longer that fish will last. And there's also a firmness with the fish that I find a lot of times, you'll see these guys and they'll butcher the fish on the boat, and like again, that's just as bad in my mind as putting it in the freezer. It hasn't allowed that fish to get cold enough. It hasn't allowed that fish to what I call set. And so, for instance, like a big swordfish, it's kind of imperative that that swordfish sits in that ice water slush whatever for an extended period of time before you cut into it, so that the internal cavity is the same temperature as the external
Mm-hmm.
skin and temperature. And when processing the fish, it's also super important that as you're processing the fish, you're not just letting it sit out on the counter. So all these little things, I've even gone even further into researching. I get this special antimicrobial paper that I wrap all my fish in,
Mm-hmm.
and I was tipped off on that as I would go and tour some of these seafood facilities that I've built relationships with, and have seen how they process it. There's a particular paper that has these antimicrobial properties on it that once you wrap the fish, oxygen is the biggest, with oxygen and moisture, bacteria thrive in a particular temperature. So the more things that you can eliminate in that equation, the better off you are for that fish. When I see people vacuum seal fish, again, in my opinion, it's a huge cardinal sin. I think that some fish you can vacuum seal, but with tuna is very soft flesh. It's very compactable. So whenever you're vacuum sealing that, you're squeezing all of those small pockets of flesh, and you're really smashing it. And I think it changes the integrity of that fish. If you ever go to a high end seafood market, no one's vacuum sealing fish. It's just not part of the process. It's just
Right.
some.
But they're also planning to eat it like pretty soon after. You know what I mean? It's like you said, it's like they're buying it for friend. Like when people go to a seafood market to buy fish, they're like gonna cook it. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So it's like, yeah, some of yeah, definitely the, like you said, the plan. It's, and you're nailing it a lot with the, like, I don't know, keeping the fish whole. It's just such a protect. Well, I don't want to dive too far there, but like, so backing up, let's let's kind of run through a little example here. Well, also, like, that is amazing to do when you have the resources to do it, which
Sure.
emphasizes back to beginning what we talked about of like why seafood's so expensive. Like all that stuff is making a huge difference. Now, is it kind of feasible for with 20 tuna coming over at one time for a crew of 7 guys at max to be able to spike EKG may bleed on a Tempur-Pedic and all that?
Yeah.
Not, I mean, it's really not practical. So the best they could do is what they can do. But like, so going to Craig's ideal situation, jetting out with the buds, setting up on a breezer, deploying their bait. That, by the way, when you said mise en place earlier, all I could think about was like someone with a bowl with their onions and shallots and whatever, and I'm like looking at my flying fish that are all rigged up and just everything.
Yeah.
Just, I'm like, oh my god, I'm gonna start calling that. Like, guys, we gotta get our mise en place in order so we are ready. Anyway, so the scenario: heading out, deploying. You and your buds deploy that flyer. Boom, smoked. Beautiful fight. Fish comes up. You guys get it. Like, what is a? Obviously, we can get crazy intricate, but like from there, let's take it from there. Like best Craig Walker practice from there till we I guess it hits a plate.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obviously it's to gaff the fish in the right place. I think that's the first most important part. I think a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people don't. They just want it in the boat. and they're not really worried about, the 70% of the fish that is edible. So making sure that you identify that particular mark before you go in for that final kill. Once that happens, the fish is on board. Obviously, making sure that it doesn't hit the deck with as much impact as possible, trying to give that a little bit of cushion on its way down.
Be
Then once
gentle
the
with it rather than the iconic slap as they do
yeah,
on the West
and
Coast. They call it slap.
and so once that happens, then a brain spike, a clip of the gills, a puncture in the bloodline, which is there's a lateral line on the tuna, and you can just make a puncture right on that, and that's where the main arteries of the fish are really moving uh,
Hmm.
through the blood and whatnot, and then from there, identifying the the mark in the head that will allow you to push that wire. And then, an extra step from there is, if you have the time, throwing it back into the water, hooked by the tail from a rope and dragging it backwards. Usually, when we're fishing out here in Southern California, the water is pretty cold. And so
Hmm.
you're at least bringing the temperature of that fish to the temperature of the water.
Yeah, I've heard
Is
that called like equalizing. So instead of like hot fish to hot like cold ice, it's like, I mean, like you said, you want to get it cool, but it's not always like, as long as it's coming down and stays
Sure.
at 32, that's the key. If it comes back up, that's what we want to avoid. So like, you know, back to your point, I've actually seen that, and sometimes we do it nowadays, especially if we have a swim step. We just like pull it on there, do all that stuff, slide it right back off, and then leave it. And so you say you put it in the water, like roughly how long do you let it
I'd
kind of?
I'd say 5 minutes. If I were to
Yeah.
put a number on it.
Hmm.
And then once you bring it back on board, you can make a slit in the abdominal area, and take out the gills and the whole internal package
Hmm.
in one kind of clean sweep. A lot of those internal organs, they have a lot of, there's obviously the fish that they've been eating that's decaying in their stomach. You want to make sure that that doesn't leak out onto any of the fish. And then once that fish has been taken out, put that into an ice sludge, an ice slurry, and then after that, then putting it on just regular ice that's packed down really, really completely
Hmm.
without the water. I think is kind of the best case scenario. If you have all the if you have all these tools available, that would be,
Hmm.
the ideal world. And then making sure that that fish has been, properly cooled on ice for, I would say, minimum of 6 hours to really ensure that that fish has been properly chilled. And then once that fish has been properly chilled, making sure that you have all the knives and all the stuff ready for that when you are processing the fish. In between each step, you're not wasting a lot of time. After every cut, you're wiping the blade, so you're not, bringing some of those scales and some of the external barriers into the internal flesh.
Hmm.
And yeah, and once you break down that fish, trying to take out all the bloodline, if that's the way you're going to process it. Usually, like I said, I have a plan for how I'm going to do it. When I usually keep the skin on and the bloodline on for my larger chunks, and I wrap them in the antimicrobial paper, and then I wrap it in a plastic wrap, and then
Hmm.
I'll put it into, a 2-gallon Ziploc. And what the bloodline and the skin actually does is that once air is exposed to the flesh, it immediately starts breaking down.
Hmm.
So the skin is a natural barrier from air, and the bloodline obviously is going to be a barrier from the flesh that you want. So I actually keep that on until I'm ready to use the product.
Almost
And
like a sacrificial trim, like rather trim off the bloodline if the air is going to get to something in the
yeah,
skin rather than like trim off pristine meat that you spend time trimming there too.
yeah.
So
So when I usually break down a fish, I usually cut it into large chunks, and then I'll wrap that with the paper, then the plastic wrap, and then divvy it up. And then let's say I have a neighbor that wants it, then I'll take the bloodline off, skin off, and cut it into steaks or however,
yeah,
if they want like, Sakua blocks or anything like that, then I can do that. But the longer you keep it in a whole format, the better it is
right.
for, the preservation aspect.
Yeah, I guess going back, one of the biggest mistakes people make when catching or when handling the tuna is ice.
Yeah.
I'm hard pressed to ever have been with anyone that's I have to say we have too much ice.
Yeah.
Unless if you catch one 200-pound tuna, I just don't know what I can't put a number on it, but man, we've filled up those big kill bags with ice. We've had an additional like coolers with the ice, and then we catch a couple, and it's like still, in my mind, we could have had more for sure.
Yeah.
Like the amount of energy that fish has, even after so no, even stepping back more, the way Craig's describing it there is catch your fish. If you can dispatch it in the water, bleed it, let all that stuff drain out. Two things. Number one, it cools the fish down so it'll burn less ice when you put it on it. Big dub. Second dub, it you don't have to clean your boat as much because the
Yeah.
blood just goes into the water, and literally you pull the fish on with no guts and no gills, and you're like, oh, it's just a
Pretty clean.
little scale, like a little bit of scale mark when like where you drag it across the deck and just comes off real easy, rather than the oh my gosh, the bloody bulwarks and underside, and people are just yeah. I mean that's kind of whatever. If you want that good memory, it's there. But it's all I really like not having that nowadays. But yeah, it cools it off, and then the amount of ice it still takes to like get it down to get the meat down to 32 degrees or whatever it needs to be is tremendous. So if there's something everyone could take away from this, do not hesitate to buy more ice if you want
Sure.
good quality fish. I have not seen a sport fishing setup where it's too much ice and you've caught like a big tuna. You know what I mean? And again, is it like if you want to bring back 200 or 180, like 4 big tuna, it's a crazy amount of ice, almost unreasonable, But like I said, if you know what you want to do, you focus on a couple, that's very doable for a lot of people. And, it makes a large difference in bringing it back. So that's very important. And then, as Craig mentioned, don't bring outside stuff to the meat. If your goal is to eat meat of tuna, not scales, not slime, not
Yeah.
bile, not mackerel in the so the more you can keep your meat clean, and until you are like ready to process it, like cut it up, it's really nice to like have less stuff to worry about, guts, blood, and then when you're cutting it up, like know what knife cuts through the skin with the slime and the scales. Either get another knife or a little wipe. Like all that introduction from outside into the meat has some sort of bearing. I guarantee if you take a bite of a beautiful piece of sashimi and it has a little bit of skin slime on it, you'll taste a difference between the next
You
one
get
down.
that
So
fishy.
yeah, fishy, yeah. So it is the slime that, yeah, exactly. Just there's stuff there. So that's an amazing breakdown of that, and that's really not that unfeasible for most. I think that's a really, like, especially if you go out with a squad of your friends and like you're all working towards the same thing with that. You catch one fish and you can keep fishing while that thing's resting and whatever, and then everyone helps when it gets back, and maybe
Yeah.
even like I really like, even just like doing it the next morning. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Just
Sure.
if you have the resources for that, just more time, more rest. Everyone's rested. Like you had time to text people your pictures and like, oh, look what we got. Like gets everyone fired up for a cool little party or whatever. So that's a very, very reasonable way to handle. So that's cool. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Were you gonna elaborate on that before I jumped in, or
No, 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 no. That's I think that's kind of hits all the marks on what it takes. And I think it's it's talks like this and just really educating people to kind of like open up their mindset of like, okay, well, I've only and always have done it this certain way. Why are people talking about this? Let me see firsthand what the difference is. And the testament is the proof is in the pudding. And when it comes to a good recipe and good ingredients as a chef, it's kind of the same equation for fish handling, is that if you do these certain methods, the chances of you having a better dish or a better outcome is much higher and much greater than if you weren't going to take these steps. So,
Mhm.
before I moved out to California, it's, I look back at my younger years of fishing, in Louisiana, and it kind of upsets me because I never followed any of these practices, and because I never knew what they were. I
Hey, we're
never
all
had the
guilty. We're all guilty
educational.
back in the day. Come on, like
Yeah,
no
and I
doubt.
think it's it's like the gift and the curse of the local. I mean, the modern era of the internet, and really being able to have all this information at our fingertips. Companies like AFCO that are making kits that are kind of this all-in-one kit,
Hmm.
that can allow people to invest a small amount of money to see if this is something that they can do. But it all comes back to like a game plan of like everyone on board with communication and saying, okay, this is what we're going to do when this happens, so that again the mise en place of fishing kind of goes into the whole aspect of like, okay, this is how this is going to work. You're gonna gaff, I'm gonna spike. You're gonna. Everyone plays a role in that, and I think
Right.
that's the beauty of fishing, is that it really, as individual as it is when it comes to catching a fish. It's very much a team sport, and there's so many factors that go into the ultimate success of the trip that everyone can kind of play a role in. And sometimes you
Hmm.
get lucky, and sometimes you skunk, but the more prepared you are, I feel like the better the outcome is. So
I don't think anything bad comes out of being too prepared. Some
sure,
superstitious people may say like, "Oh, you're kind of the anti I want to say anti ice people," but when I give like we should have bought more, what they always say is, "Well, I don't want to jinx catching one." I'm like, "Well, god dang it!" Like, but
yeah,
no, good preparation will never let you down, especially when you're in, you know, especially in the mainly tuna, bigger tuna. It's just so much prep, needs to be. There's a little forethought that will take that extra mile for sure, and yeah, but like okay, so tuna, I think at least me and you are on the same page of best practice to just eat it sooner than later. Amazing, party. Let's mitigate the freezing process. But
sure.
um, like what I mean is it, what would you? Are there any certain like what fish hold up? I guess in any sector, Louisiana, around here, whatever. What fish hold up well being vacuum sealed and thawed out in February? When I have a hankering for some seafood, because to me, you're right. If I thought out a piece of bluefin right now, it's not going to be the bluefin of what we're describing. It's now going to
Yeah.
be it's got to cook it a certain way or what. It's just not the same. But like, is there any fish that hold up like good?
Yeah,
And
I do
what do you
think that
think?
there are a couple fish out there that definitely hold up well to freezing. First and foremost, it has to be frozen in the in large format. I think that if you try to cut it down too much,
Mm-hmm.
the pressure of whatever you're putting it in to freeze it kind of uh, makes the fish mushy. But like for instance, like a grouper,
Mm-hmm.
grouper. Grouper for me, I feel like freezes really well, vacuum sealed. I have friends that bring over like Cabrilla from Cabria or whatever from Mexico that comes
Heck
out
yeah.
amazing.
Hmm.
Swordfish that's frozen in big chunks. I feel like once you defrost it, even if you have to like cut a little bit of the layer off, once you stake it out, really hard to tell the difference. Anything that's red, like any of the tunas, I find don't freeze well,
Hmm.
um, unless you have a super medical freezer, which is kind of a whole different world. In Japan, a lot of the world's reserves of tuna are actually kept at 100 degrees below freezing.
Same guy
Uh,
freezing plasma got tuna there.
yeah, and so that's not a practical way of storing, but at the same time, those are kind of the only thing. Like, uh, we obviously don't catch it here. Patagonian toothfish, or also known as Chilean sea bass, is a fish that I don't try to cook as much as just from the integrity aspect, but the quality of it. It's frozen off the boat, so
Hmm.
most people have never really tried fresh Chilean sea bass, including myself. Even
I mean, not a whole lot of trips to Antarctica.
yeah, and it's funny because a lot of people are like, "Oh, well, it's fresh," and people don't realize it's just freshly defrosted. It's
Right.
not.
Yeah.
And so ton of mislabeling when it comes to fish. It's been in Louisiana back home. They have actually started a committee that identifies restaurants and people that are selling products under the
Hmm.
pretense of, for instance, like the Greater American Red Snapper. It's one of the best fish. I love cooking it. One of the most versatile fish,
Yeah.
cooking raw, everything whole. It's one of my favorite fish to cook. A lot of places label that as being red snapper, and they'll be serving tilapia or sway or something
Hmm.
that's just very, very far from what the fish is.
That to me
And
is wild. That whole concept, especially red snapper, like that specifically, like is just I don't know how you it's a species. How I don't know. Like you're saying, thank goodness there's some agent, there's somebody out there like pointing that out because I'm like, well, you can call this tuna, but it's not. If it's if it's smelt and it's tuna, it's not. They're not. It's
sure,
got to be what it is. So that's
yeah.
pretty wild that that's out there for sure. Holy crap! But yeah, well, yeah, I definitely see the theme, which is darker fish is mainly tuna and whatnot. Just by far, their peak is when it's fresh, or I don't even want to go down the rabbit hole of dry aging because I know that's not technically fresh, but the amount of care that it has to go into that, in my opinion, keeps it that's fresh because it just anyway. But red meat, but Southern California like rockfish, whitefish, sheep's head, that stuff is just that's the midwinter
Hmm.
thought. Do make your fish and chips or ceviche. That's pretty good there. Um, I've even got in the if it fits into my chamber vac, I have been freezing like whole rockfish, which
Hmm.
I've been cooking those whole now. Oof, like just a little outside the box, bringing it back to you know back in there's like a camping little way to go. That's like an amazing way to go. Um, yeah, I guess what. So the reason why I'm kind of asking about freezing stuff is like now the one beyond freezing is thawing. I know you emphasize you're a little more of a fan of enjoy it fresh or whatever, but
Yeah.
is there a textbook way to like what is the textbook way to thaw fish that is frozen? Because there is right and wrong ways, at
Yeah.
least in my opinion.
So you definitely don't want that. You don't want that drastic difference in temperature. So I would always, always suggest ice water. So
Oh, ice water. Oh, never.
yeah, ice water. And some people say, "Oh, well, put it in your fridge and just let it thaw out." that's good, but the thing is the ambient air temperature in your fridge, let's say, is maybe 38 to 40 degrees.
Yep.
And so if it's frozen, let's just say it's at 32 degrees, it's obviously going to be colder than that coming out of the freezer, but that's just
Mm-hmm.
when the molecules will start changing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's much less of a change for that temperature exchange from ice water, which will be a consistent 32 degrees, and that will help get that fish to that level without allowing it to start to spoil. So obviously, with items that have been frozen, you can't take it out of that package and put it in ice water because then the water will um, I
Introduce
guess.
itself.
Yeah, and so I would always suggest ice water, and in the fridge in ice water
Interesting.
would be
That's,
my
I mean,
suggestion.
that's great. So in the same bag, in the ice water, in the fridge, and
Yep.
just kind of probably, I don't know, over 10 hours or so, usually for like a pound. Obviously it depends on how big
Yeah,
it
I
is, but
guess
like, a
it's I
pound
mean
portion, call
if
it.
it's a thicker chunk of meat, it's obviously going to take longer, but something that's super thin might only take, an hour or two.
Dang. Nice.
Yeah, it's much faster than you think.
Right.
Um
I've
and
been in the fridge
but
way for a while and it takes forever, but like ice water sounds better quality and faster because it's
yeah,
water
in
is
the
freezing.
water, um, what happens is that the water, every part of it, it's kind of like if you're familiar with like sous videing,
Hmm.
it's kind of like that backwards.
Yeah.
Sous videing is obviously bringing that cooking temperature up to a certain point and never getting past that, whereas defrosting in ice water is thawing it out, but it's never gonna get warmer than 32.
Ice is amazing. It's so consistent. Like kind of it really is. It's like if it's solid, it's 32. Like no questions asked. Like if I sometimes I'll like take a piece like if I'll get in from a trip and then I go to work, I like to share my like tuna with, you know, guys I work with and
Yeah.
but it is I you will not catch I do everything in my power not to let that meat get above 32 degrees. Like even in a fridge, it'll start to get weird. Like people don't like that's a big mind blow that people don't really realize. But that fresh piece of or bluefin will get it'll change even in an hour in the fridge. So it's like if I get it to the location, get it in a fridge, but it's like in a Ziploc with not in it just I paper towels what I got, but
Mhm.
in a bag of ice water, and it stays better longer, so I can at least get it to that the allotted meal time. I could like make it for them, but you know in the fridge, the ice is just such an amazing thing to key in on. Again, on your boat, more ice. It gets it to the temperature we want it, or in your fridge. And then even the reverse way, evidently, putting frozen stuff in ice water, bring it down there and it'll hold it there. So that's an
Yeah.
amazing thing I never thought of. So that's really a cool little option to exercise there. But
And that goes across the board. I mean, you can do that with beef. You can do that with pork. I mean, any chicken, anything that you want to defrost. You
mm-hmm.
know, the less temperature exchange that you have, the less the less chance you have for it, spoiling on you faster. So
Awesome. Well, yeah, that's one thing I definitely learned. If you handle your fish correctly and then just take it to anything else, like everything else will just be amazing. There'll be
yeah,
no, it like chicken and beef seem to hold up just a little like better and easier, but aim small, miss small. If you aim small on your handling, you're gonna miss small, and you might, if you don't do it, you might still have a good dish, but statistically, it'll just like be even less of a chance. So it's just
sure.
it's a great practice to for sure have. Um, so I do kind of want to divert away from this, and I believe we kind of covered a good
Yeah,
thawing and fish handling sector here. But like, so kind of in the podcast, what I've kind of imagined and built it around are a couple core pillars, techniques and experiences, which you definitely hit on both fishing and in the culinary situation. Conservation, which this kind of definitely hits on too, because you've discussed appreciating the animal. I think, or I believe, when you appreciate something, you want to keep it good. So there's just no way around that. Like, if you love your bluefin, you're gonna want to keep them coming around so you can catch more. So, and then
Sure.
just caring for it along the way is just nothing bad. That's only going to help our experience at home, and b, the longevity of the fish in our ocean, rivers, and our outdoors and all that. So I really appreciate that. Um, but one thing I didn't really think would, like, the last one is kind of engaging our community, which what I originally think is like, oh, taking introducing fishing to people who don't, or kids, or giving them a chance to see and experience all this, taking them out fishing, or introducing them to this well taken care of fish or seafood, so they can start out with a good experience, so they're going to want to, like, exercise good practices to can preserve their sport and resource. But I didn't think we'd really get to hit on that until, like, I read a little bit more about some of the articles you got, and it really got me thinking, like, what better way to engage community and others is there than food? Like,
Mhm.
you are able to, what you do, it seems like your goal is, with the sight set on bringing people together, good meal, um, breaking bread, sharing what we got. And with the fishing, it's literally sharing what's there with others. I know that's so important to the longevity of, fishing as a sport or anything in the outdoors. But you apply it, I don't want to, seems like every day, both in fishing and what you do, and appreciating the catch, but also your restaurant. So I don't know. Would you like to talk about anything there about just food and bringing how it brings people together? And yeah,
Yeah, I think as we've kind of developed as a human race and society, there's fewer and fewer things that bring people together. There's more and more things that separate us. And
yeah,
I think that food comes down to the core element of everyone has to eat. I've always said that great food is the bridge to all humanity. It's
mm-hmm,
always been a quote of mine. And I really believe in that because at the end of the day, um, when you have a great meal, it's something that you remember. You'll remember the experience, you'll remember the server, you'll remember the setting, you'll remember the dish, and even if you don't remember any of those things, you'll remember a feeling.
yeah,
And that same feeling, for me, is the excitement of when I go fishing. Is when that line gets tight, the bobber goes down, whatever it might be. It's that instant gratification of, oh my God, this is the coolest, or this is the best thing in the world, right?
mm-hmm,
And I love to bring people for their first time fishing, or doing anything in the outdoors. I think it's a way for us to kind of have a common ground of understanding for one another,
yep,
and in the educational aspect of it as well too, is that it's not just something that you go out there and do for fun. It's part of the whole survival thing,
mm-hmm,
and being able to not only catch it, but catch, cook, and clean it, I think is really important. I think you obviously hold more of an emotional attachment to something that you play the whole role in. I think a lot
mm-hmm,
of people are detached when it comes to food because they don't know the whole process. Um, I always think it's funny when, people are like, "Oh, well, I just think that's inhumane." I'm like, "Well, do you eat chicken?" They're like, "Yeah, every day." And it's like, "You ever been to a chicken farm?" It's like
right,
the most inhumane thing in the world. But
right,
chickens, get this rap of being like like kind of the standard of like okay food, right?
Right.
And so, just the educational aspect of teaching people and being able to bridge that gap of food and the story behind it, because I think everyone loves a good story. And I think at the end of the day, as a human, we all want to learn. We all have that inner desire to learn, to be educated, to kind of come up with the analytics from our own perspective. And there's no better way. When people ask about my cooking career, it's really interesting because um, food for me was something that I felt was so natural, and that's kind of how I excelled at it. Was that um, it wasn't hard for me to do. I think a lot of people get really scared and emotionally um, kind of confronted with the idea of cooking.
Hmm.
And once people are shown a very few simple things, it builds their confidence level, and their own creativity and their own mind starts to really um, elaborate. And I think that's one of the coolest things about showing people when it comes to food is you might show them, well, okay, this goes well with this. And then their mind starts to really raced with opportunities that then okay, well, maybe I can do this next time. And going back to the tuna thing, some of my buddies and I, when we catch a fish, we like to do tuna 10 ways. So we'll
Hmm.
do, we'll do 10 different applications of the same fish, and do 10 different plates of it, whether it's
Right.
sashimi or hand rolls or smoked, or, all these different applications that can be applied to the same particular, piece of meat, is a really cool way to reintroduce creativity with the process of fishing. So I always am a huge advocate of bringing new people out there, new people to experience, uh, fishing of that element. I know that I've been fishing with your buddy Pat before, and
Hmm.
I brought some rookies with me on that trip, and some buddies of mine, and it was such a cool experience because we caught a nice bluefin, and when that tuna hit, it was like they didn't know the sound of the reel going off was just like it was like a song that they never heard. It
Yeah.
was like it was such an incredible feeling. The intensity of that moment, uh, I think, personally changed all their lives forever. Even though it was like, for me, it was just another fish. But
Right.
I remember as a kid when those things happened, and that was like that pivotal moment where, okay, not this is kind of like a secret society. Like fishing is
Hmm.
like this, where if you're a fisherman and you get around other fishermen, you kind of, you guys like feed off of each other, and
Oh
it's
yeah.
like it's this kind of like unwritten world of community, which I think is kind of the same in the culinary world. Is that if I'm a chef and get together with another chef, we start creating chef ideas, and it's really cool.
Well, definitely, like, well, two things, but first of all, like, preparing that fish and cooking it, like you're saying, you and your buddy tuna 10 ways. Obviously, there's going to be some bleed over from your buddies to their friends, and what, they're going to be involved. So, like, a good experience at the table is almost the first step for some to,
Hmm.
like, go, like, that story you just or you just brought up, when they caught it, the reel and all that excitement. That's obviously best case scenario, to just be able to plop everyone down and do that. But, like, to bring them a good experience at the table, that is, for, I'd say, the majority of the people, a good opportunity to, like, get it rolling. Like, maybe I want to try this, and then it morphs into, like, going off of jetty, or whatever. But, like, that is so huge on getting people exposed to the outdoors is like a good experience there. Because if that initial experience is stinky, then
Yeah.
you're like, oh, I'll just keep buying my chicken, from the store and whatever, but like if it's like this is good. And then if they go to the store and like doesn't look like that, I want to get it, I don't know, whatever motivation, but I think it's really like a really good way to for sure start the process, get the conversation started amongst themselves to like go out and try and experience it in some way. And then once they get out there, what you described there is why I love taking people fishing. I was a
Sure.
captain of one of those bigger cattle boats for several years, and I still do charters and all that stuff. And it's a weird kind of conundrum when the time comes to like make it a career and like balancing paying bills and whatever, and like making it a career in all aspects. But the one thing that really is hard to give up is getting people to what you just described. That moment of like, oh my gosh, like this is something else. Secret society. I almost like to think about it like we're all like cavemen back in the day, and it's the day the kids get to go with the hunters, and like what, like I'm bringing this. It's like you said, the first, it's in our DNA. There's something in our DNA that gets untapped when something along that happens. Like I don't know how to describe it, but
Yeah.
I see it often. I've seen the most mature people, like calm, whatever. I've seen them just become children. That's the best way to describe it. The joy
Yeah.
that, like, remember you said you found it as a child. It's like I see them get that again, and it's just it's an amazing thing to experience. And they definitely when people come along and finally get to see what you've been talking about, or how that fish got on their plate, it definitely comes about. So yeah, but for sure, the first experience, it's such a pivotal opportunity the first time it could get brought to a plate. So maybe they'll love it, whether it's good or bad. But like back to what I was saying, like aim small, miss small. Like why give it a chance to like ever go the other way? Take a little bit of time, prepare it, care for it, bring it back, engage your community, your buds, your friends, your neighbors, and then before you know it, got another fishing buddy. Before you know, you got another person that cares about whatever regulations are going on. And sometimes it's like a vote in the state. It all goes uphill, and just the more people that care about something, the more it'll be recognized and cared for along the way. So
Yeah.
it's crazy. I found a way to relate those two things, but like that's the true way I view how important what we all do, and especially what you do, in all the aspects, both your restaurant, both your angling, and your care for your fish, and just food in general. I
Sure.
feel like it's very important, and glad we're able to share that, share some of your experience and knowledge with everyone today. So that's it's amazing, and thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Absolutely.
Yeah, well, that was a lot of topics covered, and a lot of golden information. I definitely learned a lot. You brought a great perspective. We all definitely could apply some of these things to all of our programs. And even if we can't do it all, and if we can only apply some of them, it will only make the most out of our harvest and what we decide to take home with us. And it's only going to make it better, whether you can do it all or just a couple of the steps. But it's definitely some golden information. I really appreciate you sharing with us again, and all your stories and experiences. And until next time, everyone, let's keep it wild. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Look forward to going fishing this summer.
Yeah, absolutely. See you guys.
All right, man.
Thank you all for joining us for this episode. If you guys have any questions or guest suggestions for the next one, please comment below or on the other platforms we have linked, be it Instagram or any streaming platform you're listening to this on. We'd love to keep building off of every conversation if someone has a relevant knowledge to bring to the table. So we would gladly appreciate any guest suggestions or comments. Please like, follow, subscribe to hear more. Appreciate you guys giving us a listen, and until next time, let's keep it wild. Thanks, guys.